All right. Well, hey, glory to the King. I mean, it's good to be back on this edition of Blog Talk Radio, and yeah, that's true, brother. Ugly 10 is better than 2 5. They all spend the same, right? Glory to the King. Appreciate y'all tuning in tonight, being part of the conversation. This is your host tonight, Elder Becker, Elder Douglas Becker. Anyway, hope you all had a good week. Hope you really, truly enjoyed. I know that you did. That Pastor Dowell basically another recap on the host of demonic or host of spirits that the Bible lists and speaks about, and spiritual conditions to do with the heart of man. In fact, early on, very early on, when we first came into deliverance, that was one of I remember one of the very main things he did. Are you serious? Hang on, I should have unplugged it. I can see, I know the name they're calling from me. I left a message today. Okay, hallelujah. Anyway, glory to the King. Let me do something. All right, that takes care of that. Hallelujah, glory to the King. Sorry about the interruption. But anyway, hey, again, I hope you all had a good week. And like I was saying, that was one of the things one of the very first things, big subjects that we covered early on in the ministry that Pastor did. Pastor talked about a whole list of spirits. In fact, there were so many he had them. I still have it at home as well. Every type of spiritual aspect, a demonic spirit, a spiritual condition, whatever. He went over every one of them, and he typed them all up on a list, and then he distributed the list that everybody was in fellowship at that time. So I had a copy, and we could go back and look at it, and the list consists of the scripture or the verse that contain the spirit. So very valuable piece of information. Still have mine. Hallelujah. Anyway, this is part 2 of what I was speaking about Antichrist in part 1. For those that did get a chance to listen to it, I know the prophecy can be a very opinionated aspect of the word, as it's clear if you go on media and other areas. It's been in our history for literally centuries and centuries upon centuries. So I guess it's intriguing because it points to what's going to happen to us in the end days. And it's good to know what we need to prepare for. Now we know obviously that no matter what's coming down the road, that we need to prepare our hearts and get ourselves pure and ready for the coming of our King, no matter if we see the day of his coming or if the Most High decides to remove us prior to that. But, that's what it's about. But when it comes to prophecy, again, it's still, to watch the events unfold, because the Bible interprets itself. Now, when I do my studies, those that have, followed me over the years, I tend to try to stick almost completely with the Word. I dig deep. I try to see if there's something spoken about it, because Scripture interprets Scripture, verse interprets verse. So I'm always looking to see that, verify what we see in one area is covered by something else. And it takes, especially when it comes to prophecy, and the angles and the depths of looking into prophecy, it takes an incredible amount of study. You have to endeavor to really look at historical events, in the past, because they're destined to repeat the future. That which was shall be again. And also, there's so much that it's almost overwhelming sometimes, because much of the Tanakh, the prophets specifically or mainly speak. I mean, just about every one of them, if you look at it in light of their writings, speak to these end times. You can relate a great deal of their writings, their conversation to end time events. So it adds so much more there that you have to help sort it out. And there's a lot going on. And again, there's such a huge market of interpretation, opinion that's available to anybody searching for the possibility of what the Bible is trying to say when it comes dealing with end time events. But again, this is Antichrist Part 2, and the reason I decided to study this, or it was kind of just in me a little bit, I guess. I don't know. It's just an awakening. It's time to get back into prophecy again. Maybe because of things going on in the world, the significant changes, because they are global. And nobody, I don't know, you must be on a rock if you can't recognize the fact that this is definitely global end time stuff that's happening. I mean, is the end immediately? No. I mean, as Pastor Dowell's been pointing out for years, that he's one of the specific events he's waiting for is the arrival of the two witnesses of Revelation 11. And that's going to definitely be our stopwatch, because, you know, that's when you start the timer, because they're given a length in which they will prophesy, and then at the end of that is the coming of our King Yeshua HaMashiach. So that's one of the significant things. So it is paramount that we know the sign of the times, because without it, you know, Yeshua clearly told us that we needed to stay sober and aware of these times. So it behooves us to actually try to keep up with what's going on. But anyway, in Part 1, we covered, I covered for the saints, the spirit of Antichrist and the rejection of the Messiah's coming in the flesh, and you know, how to identify that spiritual condition, because it is already in the world, as it was in the days when Revelation was written, as in the days when the Apostle John wrote it in his writings, that it's been with us for, you know, pretty much since the resurrection of Yeshua. So you know, he just gives us, you know, we got more insight to watch, because the end time, the reality of it right now is upon us. So with that, again, Brother Ugly, appreciate always your patience and putting the scriptures up there and posting the definitions for the saints. There's a lot of information here, so, you know, if anybody's watching or listening, Blog Talk Radio, whatever the case may be, you might want a pen and piece of paper, because one thing I do, and I've been told that, is I present a great deal of information, but I believe the Bible needs to speak for itself, and I try to keep my personal opinion as much as I can out of it. Sometimes, well, you know, you have to kind of help fill in the blanks, but anyway, with that, we're going to start in the book of Daniel. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 12, and we're going to read verses 1 through 4, and then 8 and 9. So it'll be verses 1 through 4, and then 8 and 9. Hallelujah. All right, verse 1. At that time shall Michael stand up, that great prince. So Michael, the archangel, he's declared, he's identified as the great prince, or the great, one of the chief rulers, which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be a time of trouble, a particular time, such as never was since there was a nation, talking about Israel now, just talking exclusively. The focus is always on Israel, Yah's chosen, Yah's elect. It's not on about, it's so much, the whole thing is to let Israel know what's going on, so Israel is aware. And there shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation, even to the same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. Now, has this already happened, or is it yet to happen? Jesus said there will also be a time of great tribulation, such as never been since the beginning, no, nor shall ever be. This is a one-time, singular, defining moment for Israel, unparalleled with any other time in our history, and it's going to be at the end. because if it has already happened and it's already been fulfilled, then what's coming up in the, quote, Great Tribulation is not going to be that difficult if this time of great trouble has already come to pass. And surprisingly, many people out there have the opinion that, and believe wholeheartedly that this has already transpired at many different points in history, more precisely in 70 AD with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And verse 2, and many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting light and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So again, has this happened or has it yet to happen? Well, the description in Daniel chapter 2 clearly defines the time for us, and the time of the resurrection is going to be after the Great Tribulation, if you understand and know what the book of Revelation says. It points it out quite clearly in Revelation chapter 20. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness as the stars forever and ever, because it will be a time of great trouble. In verse 4, but thou, O Daniel, shut up, which means keep secret the words, and seal, which means lock up or close the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. So what are the indicators, according to this verse, that we are in the time of the end? That these indicators are that many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased. And we are certainly here in this day and time. But the focus and the intent that the angel is trying to get across to Daniel is that these things that were given Daniel, these words of that book, and I think he's specifically talking more so about the last 3 chapters. Well, of course, it might be the whole book of Daniel. I don't know, but the fact of the matter is chapter 12 falls in with the happenings of 10, 11, and 12. So I believe it's directed more towards the main events in 11. But anyway, the context and the focus should be that these things need to be shut up and kept secret. Okay, they're kept secret intently and locked up and sealed until the time of the end, meaning that they won't be revealed until the time of the end. All right, Daniel chapter 12, 8 and 9. And I heard, but I understood not. Then said I, O my Yahweh, what shall be the end of these things? All the things that Daniel just got done seeing, the visions, what the angel had told him was going on. And Daniel's like, okay, so what is the end of these things? He's like, well, when's it going to happen? And the angel tells Daniel in verse 9, and he said, go thy way, Daniel, meaning don't concern yourself with it. Don't get too involved with it because it doesn't have anything to do with you. For the words are closed up. They are, again, kept secret and sealed till when? The time of the end. And the thing that, the importance to bring that out, okay, the reason that it's really important to bring that out is because for centuries now, there has been a declaration of, there has been tremendous amount of information that's been available and made available by people that have been studying prophecy about these end-time events as though they were in the end times, but which they weren't, because the words of the cover, the words of the writings here don't line up with the time zone that they were in. So they were trying to apply end-time events in their time frame. And what they were actually putting out there, they never had the amount of they didn't have the amount of knowledge or information that we have today. And now we can more clearly see how these things that are being opened up and revealed at this time, as the events of the world give us that ability to see this and to actually recognize it and put it into context. All right. Okay, these are just some of my own thoughts. And as long as I can remember, I've always viewed end-time prophecies as having yet to be made known and come to fulfillment, as in not having happened or manifest as to what these things truly be. From a very young babe, looking at this stuff, it always came across clearly to me, but these things are all future. Now, we can learn what they are by reading the book, but we haven't seen them come to fruition yet. And how can we know so much about the end for so long a period of ages, and yet these end-time events were to be kept secret and sealed till the time of the end? So when was the time of the end that the books and the words therein would be made manifest? And we're in that day today. And again, the Bible interprets itself. So why, when it comes to prophecies, this seems to be largely ignored when we tend to lean more on secular history rather than the prophetical meanings originate from the pages of the Word of Yah. And that's where, again, Scripture interprets. It tells you when you really give it some time and study. Now, we have to learn to look at the descriptions of events outlined in books like Daniel and Revelation, in Matthew, Mark, Luke. There's so many. These are just to name a few. As if these events are yet to come, as though they are unfolding and will come to light at and during these last days, and not as though they had already taken place. Meaning not as though they have already necessarily been identified, okay? Sure, we can identify through history the chronology of the events in Daniel as things that have already, for the most part, transpired, and likewise those things written about in the Gospels. And when I'm talking about that, I'm referring to in the time of Daniel. You can talk about, we're going to get to that, but it describes, in Daniel's given the understanding of certain focuses that he can actually, look at and understand and make sense of, at least in that day and age. And yet so with the people after Yahshua declared in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, Luke 21 about the things that were going to happen there in Jerusalem, okay? There has to be some huge global changes that culminates in the rising up and placement of the Antichrist, the man of sin, the son of perdition. There has to be something that is going to allow him and give him the ability to prove himself to the world, to show himself to the world, to manifest himself to the world, to give him the ability to step into that place. I believe this whole world is going to be shaken and rattled unlike at any other time in the history of this planet. Remember, it said at a time of trouble such as we have never seen, the world has never seen. And much of what we now understand and expect will change drastically. All right, historical accounts of prophecies of that day and time. Okay, that's what I was talking about earlier. Things that which was once shall be again. And in Daniel, we talked about Daniel chapter 7 last week, or the Antichrist number 1 and what it meant in Daniel chapter 7, and it was a lot of what you read in the book of Daniel, in the 4 different areas where Daniel's given visions. It's talking about the kingdoms that were in effect for them times, like the Babylonians, the kingdom of the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks, etc. And then, of course, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and that time where you can see prophecy partially fulfilled is in the time when Jerusalem was sacked and the temple was burned in 70 A.D. And that really, if you look at it, it fits the storyline of what was told, what Jesus had told the apostles, and what we read in the Gospels. And it lines up, but it takes it farther, and it's actually simply to prove. There are key things which should be taken into account in the book of Daniel as it relates to prophetic events. Now, 4 chapters in the book of Daniel, that being chapter 2, 7, 8, and 11, have to do with the visions of coming events. Of the 4 chapters, 3 of them, this is very important, 3 of them, those being chapter 2 and 7 and 11, tell us those kingdoms which were involved, whereas, I messed it up. Of the 4 chapters, 3 of them, those being chapter 2, 8, and 11, not 7, 2, 8, and 11, excuse me, tell us those kingdoms which are involved, whereas Daniel chapter 7, so Daniel's actually given the knowledge by the angel that is revealing the vision, what these kingdoms are. But in Daniel chapter 7, the angel never gives indication of any of those kingdoms that Daniel's witnessing in the vision, present or future, mentioned in any other chapters. And this, I believe, is very crucial and very significant because it applies to kingdoms and things that Daniel really couldn't grasp, okay? That it wasn't to unfold at the very end. He couldn't relate it to the time he was living in. Daniel chapter 2 words the kingdom of Babylon, the kingdom of rule at the time of the vision, but does not reveal the other 3 apparently successive kingdoms. And I encourage you to go read these chapters because you can kind of see where I'm coming from. Daniel 8 speaks of the Medes. He's told about the Persians and the Greeks, and appears to speak of a line of Greek rulers after the death of what we know historically, Alexander the Great, but fails to mention the kingdom of Babylon, because obviously there was no need to speak of that kingdom anymore because it had already passed. Now we were into the kingdom of the Medians. And Daniel 11 likewise speaks of the three yet to manifest kings of Persia and the coming kingdom of the Greeks, but neglects to speak of the kingdom of the Medes, indicating that this kingdom also and that history had already passed. So again, these three chapters showing and giving Daniel the very definitive information about that period in time. But Daniel 7 doesn't. There is no expounding on who that particular name of that kingdom are. And again, okay, like I said earlier, now it was sealed for the time of the end. Daniel, the angel was trying to get Daniel to see that this stuff is locked up and sealed until the time of the end. And when in your day, you're not going to see the manifestation of that time of great trouble. It's just not going to be in your day, but it's going to be at the end when you won't be around. You're going to go to sleep with your fathers, right? But so again, you have historically, you look at, especially when you study about this stuff, you have people, like I said before, like Adam Clark, and who was a Methodist, right? He was a Christian. You have people like John Gill. He was a Baptist pastor and a scholar. You got John Wesley, who had something to do also, I believe, with the Methodist movement. And all these men have been writing about the book of Revelation and Daniel from their perspective way back. This is 500-600 years ago. These men were around in the 16 and 1700s. And so how could this stuff that was meant to be for a time of great trouble at the end, how come they could say, even including the prophets, that this was in fact, what was going to take place at the end? That, what I'm trying to say is the books, if that was the information, the books would have been opened back then, 600 years short of the very end, if you understand what I'm saying. So why even investigate it? There's nothing left to reveal. If they gave us all the information, the correct information back 500-600 years ago, and that was the time that the book was open, that the things were unsealed, then all we have to do is read their writings, and there's no sense in studying prophecy and all the other tens of thousands of voices that have added to these prophecies over the last, centuries and centuries and centuries. We have their information. We're good to go, right? They got it all. They lay it out there too. I tell you what, they lay it out there. They got everything covered, every single thing. And so I can't look at it like that. Personally, I can't take their statements. I can't take their words as though the words were open in Daniel chapter, unsealed. That wasn't the time of the end, so they can't logically have the understanding 600-700 years ago. They really can't. It's nonsensical. I hope I'm making sense. Anyway, hallelujah. All right. Anyway, the danger is to keep looking for a history of events from our past to define the future, rather than looking to present our future to define our end, if that makes sense. All right, Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13. And we're going to start in verse 1. Brother Ugly, I'm going to be jumping all over here, so I'm going to try to keep it slow, and I doubt we might get through the whole thing tonight because there's a lot here. So for those that may listen later and the few that are listening now, I don't want to try to overwhelm somebody with too much information. But all right, Revelation chapter 13:1. And it says, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea." Oh, Brother Ugly says it makes sense to me for what it's worth. Hallelujah, glory to the King. At least I'm coming across making sense. Hallelujah. Thank you for the confirmation. Anyway, I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And by further reading Revelation 13 that we're not going to get into, you're going to find out there's a A lamb with two horns is referred to later on in the chapters as a false prophet. He rises up out of the earth. So there's definitely a significance about coming up out of the sea and coming up out of the earth, and I have my own ideas about that. I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Okay, these specific items, the 7 heads and 10 horns, are found in Daniel chapter 7. They are found in Revelation 12, which we'll get into a little bit, Revelation 13, and Revelation 17. So 4 times this particular incident, this particular description is told to us about this beast having 7 heads and 10 horns. But in Daniel chapter 7, it says it's the 4th kingdom. But that's just the horns. We're going to talk about how the 7 heads come about, okay? So, and like I said, and this beast was rising up out of the sea. The common understanding is that the sea is meant to be the people. I tend to see a little bit differently for what it's worth. I'm not trying to rewrite anything, but I tend to see this almost like, I'm going to say it in this context of what's going on, as far as I understand it, it's more like a sort of a resurrection, right? That which was dead is rising again out of the sea, and then that which was of the earth is a new creation, or as the thing that we've never seen before at any time in the life of the Word, or at least the Word on the 6,000 years as we know it, a new thing, which is the Lamb with 2 horns. I hope I'm making sense. All right, but the beauty of it is, again, the symbology. At least we can let the words, to a degree interpret itself in Revelation chapter 17 and Daniel 7, and to some degree in Revelation 12. All right, the heads of the beast. The heads of this beast. And again, this study is about the Antichrist, his coming, what to look for, who he is, what he'll do, who he is as the Bible describes. I don't know who he is, literally as a person, but what things to look for so we can identify the patterns and the things that are going in this world to help us better prepare and see who this son of perdition really is. So let's go. The heads of the beast, Revelation chapter 17, verses 1 through 3, and then 9 through 11. All right, and there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and these angels, the 7 vials, are those that, the vials are the ones that contain the wrath of Yahweh. You'll find in Revelation 15 and the pouring out in Revelation 16. And talk with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. So the angel, one of the angels, is going to show John, he's going to break it down and show him the judgment of the great whore, and he does that in chapter 18, what happens. But he also goes on to describe what the breakdown is of this whore, okay, and the beast that she sits on. We'll find it in verse 2. With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So she is a worldwide entity. And like I said last week, and I'll just say it clearly right now, the woman is clearly defined at the end of Revelation 17, verse 18, as that great city which rules over the kings of the earth. Okay, so we're talking also about a city. All right, so there's something emanating, coming out, positioned, presented, whatever it may be, politics-wise, religious-wise, whatever, but it's emanating, coming out, and going forth from this great city. So he carried him away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy. Every one of these descriptions now, relate someplace else in the Word. So that's why you need to have, really need to know when it talks about, it can get overwhelming. Honestly, it really can. There's so much there, but the way to best define that, at least get a somewhat of an understanding, is to find out where else it's written, so you can, help fill in all the blanks. It gives us a fullness. Study to show yourself approved, right? I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of the names of blasphemy, which comes up a great deal of times, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, just like Daniel 7, just like now, Revelation 13, we have the repeat. We have this beast here, the significance that John sees different. This one is scarlet covered. In Revelation 13, and we haven't read that yet, in verse 2, it breaks down the description of the beast. Here it just gives a color. It calls it scarlet, having 7 heads and 10 horns, but it's identified the same way as the beast of Revelation 13, having the 7 heads and 10 horns. Hope I'm making sense. And something very significant, scarlet is defined as crimson. If you look it up and do the study, which means it's a very dark red. And incidentally, the dragon of Revelation 12 is described as being a red dragon. So you can see the connection between the two. It's in the color. And there's a myriad of opinions about what the color means. Red's anger, it's murder, it's everything else. But I don't know what the significance means of the particular beast. Not so much the woman, but the beast means, other than it's identifying who the beast belongs to for real. Like there's no room for error, no room for misjudgment. This is of the dragon. All right, Revelation 17, verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. Remember, we're going to try to, at least to a degree, identify the heads. The 7 heads of the beast. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. The context, again, is the 7 heads that are on this beast, the scarlet-colored beast. And the angel says that these are 7 mountains. So they're not literal heads, but they're symbolic as heads. So what does the headship mean? What are heads symbolic of, and why the mountains? Okay, let's look at the word. The word sits. It's very important because this woman actually is, she's with the beast. She's joined to the beast. She's sitting on top of this beast. And that can be taken, presented in many different ways. But the Greek word sits is the Greek 25:21, kathe maya. It's from the Greek 25:96. And it means to sit down. Figuratively, to remain, it means to reside, dwell, and sit. So this woman resides or dwells with this beast, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Okay, and the word mountain. The word mountain is the Greek 37:35, oros. Remember, we're trying to break down the meaning of the 7 heads, which the angel says are 7 mountains. So we have to understand what mountains is, at least to the best of our ability, because we have instantly what comes into our mind is a literal mountain, right? But when you're talking something in a spiritual language, it's a lot more than that. Like Yeshua said, you look at that mountain, be thou removed. It's not a literal mountain he's ever talking about. It's a spiritual impasse. It's a spiritual strongman. It's a spiritual principality, right? That kind of faith to actually bind that thing and to move it out of the way, to get it out of your life. Okay, mountain, the Greek 37:35, oros, probably from an obsolete word, to rise or rear, da-da-da-da-da. It means a mount as lifting. Okay, yeah, this is the Strong's again. Forgive me, Brother Ali. As lifting itself above the plane. So it's something that's exalted higher than everything else. So it's very viewable. It's very evident. It stands out, if I'm making sense. As lifting itself above the plane, you can't miss it. So we have these 7 heads that have lifted themselves above everything else. So they're clearly visible, right? Okay, personally, I don't believe that the 7 mountains are hills or mounts as the Greek 37 defines as so much trying to emphasize a physical geological characteristic, but more so something that is better defined as a spiritual kingdom, a government, or principality. And in conjunction with Daniel 7, this reinforces the idea that the mountains are kingdoms or realms or reigns or dominions. But could it literally mean seven hills? Sure it could. I mean, it really could. And kingdoms for us today can also describe, in Daniel's time, they described the nation, right? They're actually the nation of Babylon, the nation of the Medians, the Persians, the nation of the Assyrians, but they were also identified as kingdoms. So, but anyway, when I look at this, when I see this, I don't see it as a literal physical geographical hill on which this city sits, this woman, which is identified as the great city. I actually believe it to mean that it is a form of government, seven governments or principalities or kingdoms, okay? And I don't know if I want to bring this up tonight because I don't know if it has to do with this, just to continue reading in Revelation verses 10 and 11, because a lot of these are my own thoughts, but they're not really so much about to do the study. Maybe for another time. Yeah, if you read Revelation 17, 10, and 11 in conjunction with, what the hell, Well, I mean, I've already put it out there now, so. Okay, going on to Revelation 17:10, and there are seven kings, five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space. So, the first description of the scarlet-colored beast, it's just mentioning 7 heads and 10 horns. It doesn't say anything about kings, right? It talks about mountains, and then it goes on to say 7 kings immediately after that. So where did this kings just come out of? It just came out of nowhere. The only really way to put this together is say that the kings are joined to these kingdoms or these principalities or these realms or these dominions that I believe are these governments that represent these 7 mountains, not literal hills. Okay. In fact, I accidentally came across this the other day, but the Douay-Rheims Bible, which is the Catholic Bible, actually adds to verse 9 of Revelation 17. And at the end of it, it said that these are kings, these mountains are kings. Actually comes right forth and say that these mountains are actual kings or some type of principalities or rulers, okay? And I don't know if any other versions have that, but that one does. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. See, again, talking about prophecy and trying to hit one subject is very difficult. The whole context is the Antichrist number 2, but this is all the stuff that surrounds him. And we could obviously get overwhelmed in a pool of information here. All right. Revelation 17:11. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7 that go into perdition. So it's talking about the scarlet-colored beast. And in verse 8, which I didn't have on here, of Revelation 17, it talks about that he came out of the bottomless pit, and that he was before and he shall be again. He was not at the time that John was given the writing. He was prior to that, and continue reading show that he is going to come again. Okay, so it said the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th and is of the 7th and go into perdition, meaning that this is where you get into a whole lot of stuff, but what I believe that it's saying is that he was and was not, he is of the 7, but he is a resurgence or something regenerated, let me use that word, at the very end. But he originally is of these 7 mountains, these 7 principalities or powers or rulers. Anyway, I'm going to skip that because I'm getting off in a whole lot of the subject that I shouldn't be. All right, Jeremiah 51:24. We're going to help define the word mountain as in head, so we can break it down better and see that it doesn't literally have to mean a physical mountain, but spiritually, in spiritual language, it means much other than that. Jeremiah 51:24. And I will render unto Babylon and to all the inhabitants of Chaldea all their evil that they have done in the sight of in Zion in your sight, saith Yahweh. So the context here is Babylon, the actual kingdom of Babylon. And Jeremiah is receiving this information. He's relaying it. He's speaking it by the word of the Most High. And I will render unto Babylon. So the context or the focus is Babylon. In verse 25, behold, I am against thee, O destroying mountain. So clearly the Most High is saying that Babylon is likened in this kingdom to a destroying mountain. He shows the magnitude and the significance of this empire by describing it as a mountain. So it's easy to see how the mountains of Revelation 17 are better portrayed as kingdoms or principalities, realms or dominions, that sort of thing. In fact, Daniel chapter 7 talks about these four beasts that came up out of the sea are actually described as kingdoms. So it's a very good lock. It's a very good tie right there to show that this isn't a literal hill. But we're going to talk about that briefly. Saith Thou, which destroyeth all the earth, and I will stretch out my hand upon thee, and roll thee down from the rocks, and will make thee a burnt mountain. All right, Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 3, still talking about the 7 heads and 10 horns, and the significance surrounding the Antichrist. Remember the studies about the Antichrist, but it's kind of full here, so we'll try to keep in tune. Revelation 12, 1 through 3. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Well, the woman, most people agree, and for what it's worth, I do too clearly, that, and you find out by further reading, that it's obviously Israel, all right, the nation of Israel. The 12 stars, and the head of her, on her head, a crown of 12 stars. That's completely symbolic of the 12 tribes. And she, being with child, cried, clothed with the sun, meaning that she had the light of the Most High. The moon, I'm not exactly sure what that is. I'm not even going to speculate at this point, but I can pretty much say for all assurance that the woman is, in fact, Israel, and the 12 stars are the 12 tribes. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. So we have a pregnant woman here, right? Israel. And there appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon. And this dragon, this great red dragon, as in the scarlet-colored beast, as the beast of Revelation 13, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. So we have the same identifying features, 7 heads and 10 horns. So there's definitely significance in this, more so in the end time. Some notes. All right, Revelation 12, verses 7 through 12. Okay, so that was... there's so much here. I'm wondering if I should skip some of this. I got a lot. All right, we're just going to hit something quick. Anyway, so this woman, right, has this dragon hovering over the top of her, as we'll see. I didn't even read that. So she was, the rest of the story, they have this 7 heads and 10 horns on this, this dragon with the 7 and 10 horns, and significantly the 7 crowns on its head. Watching this woman, as it says in verses 4 through 5, and then she delivers a child. It's a man-child. He's going to rule this earth with a rod of iron. He's caught up into heaven, and we know that it obviously is Yeshua. The only one, the first fruits of the resurrection. He's caught up to be with Yah and next to his throne, if you read the other verses. So then you go down to, so something happened. Now, okay, so this dragon was waiting to devour this child. He was going to put an end to Israel and its Savior right then and there. I mean, you take out Yeshua. I mean, was it a literal, physical? Yeah, he tried it with Herod. We know that story. But all through Jesus' time on this earth, Satan did everything he could to try to tempt him. We have the account of when Jesus went out and fasted 40 days and 40 nights and was visited of Satan, how he tried to get him continually to stumble. Well, that would have been the same thing as the devil devouring him, the dragon devouring him, because if one sin would have been found in Yeshua, we would have had no Savior, and there would have been no release of the people from the holding place, or Guyana, which gets into a whole other thing. And there was war in heaven. Michael's angels fought against the dragon fought, and his angels. So there's this huge war going on. Why? Because, well, let's continue here, and we'll find out why. And prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. Well, why wasn't it found any? And there's a lot of speculation about is when this happens, or if it did happen, will it happen? Yeah, Brother Ugly, I know some refer to woman as a constellation. There's all kinds of stuff out there. So, I mean, like I said, there's a plethora of different ideas out there about prophecy, and it's quite literally, open to that type of scrutiny until more events unfold here at the end. And the great dragon was cast out, the great dragon that had the 7 heads and 10 horns, that old serpent. So we're going to identify who the great dragon is. The devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven. Okay, here's the declaration. See, there's a series of events here. The child is Jesus is unsuccessfully taken out by the Satan. There's a big war that's going on in heaven. Jesus, and if you go back and you can read, there's accounts in John in 3 or 4 places, and I don't got them here because that's not the subject of the study to prove that. I absolutely totally believe that this happened at the resurrection of Yahshua, and I think I have a very convincing case for it. We're cast out with him, and I heard the loud voice and saying in heaven, now is come salvation or deliverance from the holding place, okay, and strength in the kingdom of our Yah and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of the brethren is cast down, which accused them before our Yah day and night. Well, why was he cast out of heaven? Why was there a big war? Well, because Satan lost his place. He had no more legal authority or rights. Okay, let's keep reading here first. Verse 11. And they overcame him. Who did? The ones that were prior to the death of Yahshua, prior to Jesus, becoming the sacrifice and the release from the holding place where, God, I can't get in all that. So if you want to email me sometime, I'll tell you the rest of the story. I've actually got a study on it. And they overcame him, or they overcame Satan's legal authority and right to keep the saints in the holding place, Gehenna, Sheol. And they overcame this by the blood of the Lamb. That is what gave them the release, because it totally absolved that conscience of sin that could never be purged by the blood of bulls and goats, as we read in Hebrews chapter 10. And by the word of their testimony, because they kept on knowing that they had a promise coming. They kept looking forward. They knew that their Yah would save them. And they loved not their lives unto the death. And that's the same ability that we have today. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb, by the word of our testimony. And because we don't love our lives, we're being used of the Most High as we need to. I mean, they're talking about here they're trying to preserve their lives when it's impossible to do it because every man meets death. So you submit yourself to Yah. Verse 12, therefore rejoice ye heavens. And why is there rejoicing? Because the accuser is no longer given place in heaven. He has gotten the boot, and that's why the heavens are rejoicing. Also because those that were kept in the holding place, those souls of the righteous that weren't allowed to be released because they were kept prisoner. And boy, that's all over the place in the Word too. Isaiah 14 is one of them. And talking about Lucifer. And ye that dwell in them, woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath. Who's the wrath against? We find out at the end of the chapter it's going to be against the seed of Israel, because he knoweth he hath but a short time, because he lost. He was defeated on the cross, or on the stake. Oh, boy, forgive me, Father. On the stake, at the resurrection, he was defeated, and he no longer had the ability to go up and point in Yah's face and said, well, this one here is not worthy, this one here isn't worthy, that one will never get out, they belong to me, because they're still in sin and they can't enter into heaven. You won't allow them in that state, in that condition, and it's only the blood of Jesus that freed them and allowed their souls to actually enter. Man, their bodies are still in the dirt. They're going to come forth on Resurrection Day in a spiritual body, but their souls got to go into glory. All right, Isaiah 51:9. Isaiah 50. Why? Oh boy, See, that's another thing. I'm getting way too far out here. Forget that one, Brother Ugly. I guess that's for another time. I want to stick to the context here. All right, Revelation 12, verse 17, as I said, he's having great wrath, this seven-headed dragon with 10 horns. He's got great wrath, and so he's going to make war with the remnant of the seed. And the accumulation of his wrath is going to come at the very end. It's going to totally be against the seed. He's going to try one last time to totally annihilate every trace of Yah's representatives on the face of this earth. Everything that he can possibly throw out there to remove all testimony of the Most High in the end in them 3.5 years. That's why it's going to be a time of trouble as the world has never seen. All right, verse 17, and the dragon was wroth with the woman and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of Yah and have the testimony of Yahshua HaMashiach. So they have to have these qualities. They have to be identified in these things, in these areas, and that's who he's going to make war with, the remnant of her seed. Now, if you're out there and you're not keeping the commandments of Yah, and you don't have the testimony of Yahshua, then the focus is not going to be so much on you. And that goes another area, too, that I'm not going to cover right now because that goes into areas right now that are looking like that it's better left spoken by others. So I'll leave that alone for right now. And I got my notes. But, all right, backing up going a little bit, I got caught off on that. This much I will say, right? Okay, so I already explained in Revelation 17 that the mountains are, to me, clearly kingdoms or principalities. And these kings, 5 are fallen, one that is, and then one is to come, and then the 8th one is the beast. You understand Revelation 13, we haven't read it yet, but in verse 3, I believe it is, or verse 2, that we'll get there, that one of the heads was wounded. And it had a deadly wound, but it was healed. Well, I have a few different ideas about that. I understand that there's a common idea about what it means, and I don't want to step on that at all. But I believe the wound was a result of the war when Michael and the angels fought against Satan and his angels. And I'm not going to go into all that, but I also believe I know who the wound ended up on, and that will be more visible at the end. You have to understand something about Revelation chapter 18, right? Is that looking at the context, looking at the content of what's written about that great city, it actually tells you who's going to comprise that city, who's going to be composed about that city by the very description of itself. All right. If you look in the Word and if you do the study and take the time and all the information, at least as far as I can tell right now, you have to do a lot more digging. But you have the king of Babylon is identified in Isaiah 14 as Lucifer. The king of Egypt, Pharaoh, king of Egypt, is identified as Bel, or in the dragon of the sea. You have the king of Tyrus, which is identified. These are spiritual meanings too. These are principalities or rulers. It could be angels, a myriad of things that actually had rule, spiritual rule. And we're with the dragon. We're Satan's right hand demons or angels, whatever the case may be. Because remember, it was the angels that fought. And some people actually say they were the principalities that fought with the dragon. But you have Tyrus, and Tyrus is, Tyrus is what? I can't believe he is. Anyway, he's got a name that attaches itself to Satan as well. Okay, so and you have these different, like Michael withstood the prince of Persia, but he withstood Michael 21 days. That's why they couldn't. So there's spiritual entities, there's spiritual principalities, and I honestly believe that's what makes up these kingdoms. And there's a whole lot more, but let's stick. The context is Antichrist. And oh boy, see that's the problem. It's so huge and vast. All right, let's go back to the 7 hills. Remember I said in Revelation 17 that it could literally mean 7 hills, talking about the heads being mountains, okay? And if you Google city surrounded by 7 hills, it will just about knock you off your chair how many of these things actually come up. There's, even in the United States alone, that actual cities that are surrounded by 7 hills. So it's all, I don't know if this is a point of confusion, if it's left out there for speculation, if it's there to give people so many different ideas of what it might be. You know, people say that Babylon is United States of America. The whole world is corrupt, for Pete's sake. You think United States of America, that's going to be judged. You know, obviously Babylon being Rome and the Roman Catholic Church and the system, you know, it's more spiritual than physical, but there are just so many things out there. First time I typed in cities surrounded by 7 hills, I was like, wow, damn, all over the world. You know, but the biggest two that are discussed back and forth in prophecy are Jerusalem and Rome, okay? And, you know, I've looked into both of them and their history, and I'll have to say this, that by far Jerusalem has been the more focus of, Brother Ugly, many claim the 7 hills of Rome. I know that's where you can go back and look at Wesley, Clark, Gill, all of them. They all use that same, but again, the book was sealed until the time of the end, so that they already had the answer. Why are we doing all the study? It doesn't make any sense. But, you know, Jerusalem, look at the history. It's been destroyed twice. It's been fought over 16 times. It's besieged 23 times, attacked 52 times, captured and recaptured 44 times. That's just the significance. This city, because it was always been identified as Yah's holy city, that it's been the focus of the major religions to try and use it as their focal point, their city, where they can claim, because they all have a dibs in the significance behind Jerusalem. They all don't have that with Rome, but they all do have that. Just about every major religion, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all have, they call Jerusalem their capital, their holy city. They all have dibs, so who's right? And then if you look at Rome, historically it did sit on 7 hills. They actually claim today the geography has changed so much that it's no longer physically sitting on 7. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but that's just some of the stuff I read, you know. And you probably say the same thing about Jerusalem. As many times it's been bulldozed over and rebuilt on, maybe to help disguise for the future. I don't know. But at no time has the Vatican ever sat with the ancient city of Rome, ever, not one time. And people may not know this, but Rome was actually moved during the time of Constantine. He rebuilt a city. It's called Istanbul, Turkey now, but he named it Constantinople, and that was the new Rome back then. So he actually took it physically out of Italy, what we know Italy today, or the Roman Empire, and built it in what is today Turkey, when they owned that area, which is on the Mediterranean. So a lot of history, but at no time in history has the Vatican ever itself sat on 7 hills, but the city of Rome has. So I don't know if that means anything, but there definitely may be, you know, something to consider there. All right, let's keep going. This is about Antichrist, all right? And I'm not going to take a break simply because there's not enough people listening, at least as I can tell. Yeah, I know. Brother Ugly says, I've heard some claim that Jerusalem today isn't the biblical Jerusalem, but evidence. Yeah, I know. Everything is there, and they speak this stuff because they want to get people away from the focal point of what's coming up in the future. So, you know, there's, you know, a lot to consider. You're welcome, honey. How that was for Diane. All right, the horns of the beast. No, wait. What did I do? Okay, just a minute. All right. I have no idea what I have that in there for. I got to go back and see why I have that in there. I'm talking about the city, and then I got Revelation 18:7 and Matthew 26:64, and it has to do with, them must be, okay, them shouldn't have been there. I don't know why. But let's talk about the horns of the beast. All right, we talked about the heads, and I hope the conclusion is that, my other shy sister Lisa is also listening. Bless you. And 262, that might be Brother Jim. That's Wisconsin. That much I know. Well, bless you all. And those listening on Blog Talk Radio, bless you too. Hallelujah. All right, the horns of the beast. Remember, we've covered the 7 heads, which my personal belief, according to my studies, is 7 kingdoms. And the 7 kings, and again, we're not going to go on that tonight, but I believe it definitely is something that I'm going to continue to consider in the future if y'all allows me. All right, 3 horns, the horns of the beast. Remember that Daniel 7, Revelation 12, 13, and 17, again, all describe entities, whether they be the dragon or the beast, and in Daniel 7, the 4th kingdom as having the horns of the beast. Another thing, too, is to consider as this comes up now. I don't know what the significance, I believe I know, but hey, honey, Brother Ugly says, Shalom, Sister Diane. As you remember in Revelation 12, talking about the dragon, he has 7 heads with 7 crowns. But after the battle, it's my belief that after the battle, the crowns, the authority, the dominion of these 7 heads, whatever they were, if they were kingdoms, if they were principalities, like I absolutely believe they are, were stripped. Okay, Jesus put all this authority underneath him now. They no longer had the same authority they carried before he was crucified and ascended into heaven to be on the right hand of the Father. That authority, that crown was stripped. And then when you see the later on talking about Revelation 13, Revelation 17, you see the heads, but they have no crowns. But the horns now have the crowns on them, which we're going to read about. The horns bear the crowns. And that's because it says clearly at the end of Revelation 17, we're going to get to that Satan's going to use these new horns, these new kings, these new principalities, whatever they are, to reestablish his kingdom on earth because he thinks it's going to go on. And we're going to read about that. So the horns, Daniel chapter 7, verse 23 and through 25. Revelation, Daniel 7, 23 through 25. Thus he said, the 4th beast, this is talking about that the angel is revealing to Daniel. The 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth. And remember the last time in the Antichrist part 1, there was 4 beasts that rose up out of the sea. Well, the concentration, the focus here has to be on the 4th one because the other 3 are never talked about as having horns, just the 4th beast. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. This is going to be worldwide domination. This is going to be forced compliance like we've never seen. And we're seeing small bits and traces of it just in this country with this COVID shit. You know, they're basically slowly every day stripping away the so-called, quote, rights of the people and saying it's for the necessary good of the whole that we implement this, do that, or the other thing, right? I mean, I was just told, I think Diana was one that told me that Raleigh, North Carolina has made it mandatory that you have to have, and I'm sure there's plenty of other places, that you have to wear a mask when you're outside. And if you don't, you're subject to arrest and penalty. I mean, come on, what is this stuff is getting just insanity, but anyway. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings. So this is going to mirror Revelation 17. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them. And he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue and humble 3 kings. And the word subdue here, meaning that this little horn, which I identified in last time, and is actually, to me, is the Antichrist. And he has a particular way that he's going to conduct himself so he can remain in power, all right, to convince the people. Subdue, meaning that this little horn, this Antichrist figure, will use or employ methods to humble or shame 3 of the 10 kings and bring them into line and unison in forms of forced compliance, because there's going to be some holdouts there, but they're all going to get on board. Eventually they will be, through promises, through threats of death, whatever. But clearly the 10 horns are identified as 10 kings. So the beast, the dragon in Revelation 12, and abase, humble, subdue, put down, as my brother Ugly posted that definition of subdue. It's the Hebrew 82:14. If anybody wants to look it up, I think I had my first part 1 of Antichrist. He's going to bring him into line and use and enforce compliance. Okay, so but again, these 10 kings, these 10 horns are identified clearly as 10 kings. These are actual literal figures, I think, but also they got some principalities behind them too. Are they going to be men? Are they going to? I don't. But they are kings. Okay, so they're going to be something, a form of power, a form. These are going to have a place of dominion, a place of rule. They're going to be a principality, recognized figure, obviously in the new satanic kingdom, which will never come to pass. All right, in 25, and he shall speak great words, meaning the little horn, not the 10 kings, but this little horn that came out from the 10 kings. And he's the one that's going to do all the talking. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until the times, and dividing of time. And like I brought out last time, this Antichrist figure, this little horn, is going to try to accomplish all this in the time frame of 3.5 years, when he thinks to change laws and times. Because times, and dividing the times, we can prove by Revelation 12, means 3.5 years of 42 months, or 1,260 days. All right, Revelation 17:12, still talking about the horns, because the horns are do directly with the little horn of the Antichrist. And the 10 horns. What was that? Give me 2 seconds. I don't know what that was. And the 10 horns, Revelation 17:12, which thou sawest are 10 kings. Okay, backtracking, just a refresher that the horns that were saw on the scarlet-colored beast, along with the 7 heads on the scarlet-colored beast, on who the woman sits or resides or dwells among. Okay, these mountains. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive powers as kings 1 hour to be. So they're looking for a future promise from this Antichrist, from this last beast system. And that's why they're remaining and holding and complying with this end-time beast. All right, it's clear that these 10 kings had no kingdom in which to rule at that time, but it appears by the context and inflection of the wording that these 10 kings would receive their respective kingdoms in due time. In Revelation 17:13, and these have one mind, and they shall give their power and their strength unto the beast. So there's I would rather say that these kings here are actually literal men, right? Just as the Antichrist is going to be a literal man, or Satan incarnate, or the false Messiah, which was foretold to come. These two are going to be literal powerful, because they're given positions of power upon this earth to rule over the people for as long as Satan thinks he's going to have his kingdom. Remember, he's after the seed. He is after the seed, and he's going to do everything in his power to get to the seed. Anyway, I got to be quiet about that. If anyone attempts to prove the commonality between Daniel 7 and Revelation 13 and 17, then some things must stand as a solid point of reference and understanding, as to not allow for double interpretations. There appears to be a common thread amongst Christian commentators that the claim that the horns of Daniel 7, now you have to go back and look, but many of these Christian commentators hold to the fact that the Daniel 7, these horns of Daniel 7 are, what do I got, 7? 10 successive rulers or kings from the kingdom of the forest beast, which sounds good. What in the world? I don't know, but there was 10 horns anyway. Christian commentators that claim that the horns of Daniel 7 are 7 successive rulers or kings from the kingdom of the forest beast, which sounds good until it is brought under the light of Revelation 13 and 17, both of which mention the 10 horns as in present day, today, not back then, but today. So if it had already come to pass, and when I say the 7 is, if you do the study, they say the 10 horns, right? They say this is this emperor, this is this emperor, this emperor, this emperor, all to do with the Church of Rome, right, or with the Roman Empire, right? But if you take that and compare it to Revelation 17 and them 10 horns, if they're in fact talking about the same 10 horns, then it can't be people that have already ruled, because it hasn't come to pass yet. It's still in the future. I hope I'm making sense, right? Daniel 7:24 says that these 10 horns are 10 kings which shall arise out of the fourth kingdom. So we know for certain the origin of these 10 kings. Historically, it has not happened yet. Okay, Daniel chapter 7, the entirety of the chapter was the one place that we know for certain that Daniel was given a specific window to the very end, to the very, very end time. And again, I said earlier, because in that vision, he was never told the names of any of the kingdoms. He was given a description by the look of what animal it was. There was a lion, a bear, a leopard, and the fourth beast would have iron teeth, and it, just a nasty looking thing. It really wasn't in the shape of an animal, but that's how but the angel never bothered to reveal. He didn't say this was the Babylon, this wasn't the Medes, the Persian, the Greeks, the Romans, none of that. He didn't give a description. And this all lends to Daniel 7, to me, being something that Daniel was given privy to about what's going to happen at the end in Revelation 13, and we're going to get there and show you something about that. And if these 10 kings, these 10 horns, are the same horns mentioned in Revelation 13 and 17, they cannot be 10 successive kings or rulers that originate from the fourth kingdom of Daniel 7, because many people hold that the fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 is the Roman Empire. But if that's the case, then the 10 horns are already been eliminated by history itself. Demonstrates clearly that these 10 kings had received no kingdom as yet. Remember, we read that earlier. They didn't receive a kingdom. They have not yet put into power. They've just been given the promise. Yeah, I know 10 popes. So there's so many different kind of stories, but there's been a hell of a lot more than 10 popes, brother. Everybody, you know that, I know that. So there's the black popes. There's the ones that are out in front. Anyway, going back to Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Revelation 12, 1 through 3. I know this is a lot of information. Thank you for your patience. I hope I'm going slow enough and clear enough to, at least give an understanding, explanation about what all this stuff means, at least to the best of my ability. All right, back to Revelation 12, 1 through 3, talking about the great red dragon, which we know now by continuing reading down in Revelation 12 is that old serpent Satan. Okay, so the red dragon is Satan. And Satan has 7 heads and 10 horns, meaning he has a hell of a support group. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth and pain, to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on his head. Like I said before, that no other place that you're going to find that the heads had crowns on them. But here we're talking about the horns. Again, the dragon, Revelation 12, is depicted as having 10 horns during the time frame just before the birth and ascension of Yeshua. If these horns are the horns found in the beast of Revelation 17, then we already know that these same horns were kings. Another interesting point is found in the crowns from Revelation 12. The horns of the dragon are not mentioned as having crowns, but on the beast of chapter 13 of Revelations also, because remember now, you don't see these crowns. Again, see, I'm not going to try to attempt to explain everything. I don't know why Satan is depicted of having 10 horns when he's historically, or they're showing that in the context, he's standing before Jesus to be born and tries to kill him then. So these kings, are they going to possibly demonic spirits that are going to enter into 10 literal men? I don't know. I mean, but there's too much that lines up that, that doesn't allow us to actually dispel this or dismiss this. So if you, again, after the battle or after whatever the case may be, that the crowns that were on the heads, the 7 heads that the dragon, you don't see that anyplace else. And so that tells me, again, after the battle, their authority was stripped. And Daniel chapter 4 tells you they still had their dominion. It wasn't taken away, but they didn't have the dominion over the saints through Jesus Christ. Now we have that ability to bind them, to come against them in prayer by the name and the blood of Yeshua. He gave us that ability. So, in effect, we have that same authority over them. Who's, Yeshua put all enemies under his feet. And the last enemy that's going to be faced is death. So, but now we see the 10 horns that are in Revelation 13 and 17 as being depicted as having crowns on their heads, meaning that they're going to be future rulers, which lines up perfectly with the text. In Revelation 13:2, we're getting back into reading of 13. We're going to remember we started at 1 in the beginning of the verse. We broke down the heads and the horns, at least to the best of my ability, and there's obviously more that's going to be revealed in its time. Remember, the book is going to be open at the end, not 100 years ago, not 500 years ago, not 1,000 years ago. At the end, it's going to be unsealed. Revelation 13:2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. So remember in verse 1 they saw a beast rising up out of the sea. And so John goes on to describe this. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, that being the main body, and his feet were as the feet of a bear. So he's giving you the description. The main body was the feet, appears as a leopard, the feet as of a bear, and the mouth is the mouth of a lion. Okay, it doesn't tell you the head, but it gives you the mouth of the lion. Obviously, there's a head of the lion, and his mouth is in his head. And the dragon gave, the authority from these figures, the dragon gave, which means he granted or bestowed upon this beast his power, which is his force, his miraculous power. If you look up the word, it actually means a miraculous power, and his seat, or his throne, and great authority, mastery or control, jurisdiction. So if I read it without all my plugins, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and the mouth is the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and his great authority. So Satan was behind all of this. We know the dragon is Satan, right? That old serpent, right? We know that Satan gave this beast. Now something is different here. And what has happened here is that in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel sees he sees the entirety of these animals, right? The leopard, the bear, and the lion. And then he sees the fourth kingdom. But here, in John's vision, he doesn't see them as entities, separate entities. Now, they're joined together, right? They're actually has come together as in one. So they pooled all their power and their resources together, and they become one massive beast system, all right? One massive beast kingdom. They have joined forces. This is an end-time event in which Satan is going to dominate and take control, and he's going to pull all of his resources out in order to hold his position. So the three entities you see in Daniel 7 come together at this time and become a strength as one. And we're going to show you something about the fourth kingdom that's in Daniel 7 that you don't see directly mentioned here, but it's here. It's already here. It's in the wording. You just got to pull it out of the words. All right. So, let me see something here. I get interrupted, but I have to look at this. I don't know if that's for us or not, but I don't think so. No, it's for somebody else. All right, sorry, I got distracted. Anyway. So they're together. They're seen together as one, not so much operating separately. They're together as one here, and they come together in the end. This is an end-time event. All right, Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful, terrible, and strong exceedingly, and had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So again, the identity is in the heads and the horns. That's what joins these together. That's the common link between these and all these different books, right? I mean, that's a solid connection between all of them. And again, there's no fourth beast mentioned in Revelation 13:2. We have a leopard, which is seen as having bear's feet, and a mouth of a lion, which obviously means the head of the lion is there as well. Okay? And I'm going to show you something here shortly. Daniel chapter 7, verse 23. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse or set apart or different from all the kingdoms, meaning it's going to stand up and be significantly more identifiable, more, how do you want to say it? It's going to catch your attention in a greater degree. And shall devour the whole earth, bring everything into submission and compliance, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. This is Daniel chapter 7:23, describing the fourth kingdom, which you don't see in Revelation 13:2. Again, you only see the animal figures here joined together as one. All right, the fourth kingdom will be and is the kingdom of Satan on this earth, which will seek to stamp out any and all forms of worship to other gods or God. So I believe that is the kingdom of Satan, his literal kingdom. And he's got joining all of his demonic principalities and forces and their rules together behind him, because that's the... Well, okay, I'll show you the seven heads here in a minute. I saw one, okay, Revelation 13:3 through 5. Revelation 13:3 through 5. And Paul goes on to say, and I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And my thought has been for a while is that this wound was a result of the battle that took place, the dragon and his angels, and Michael and the other angels in the host of heaven. And during the war, there was a mortal wound placed on one of the seven heads. And I have my idea who I think the seventh head is, or the seventh head, that one of the seven that received the wound. That's my own opinion. So anyway, Revelation 13:4, and they worshipped the dragon, which gave whose way? The people of the earth. Well, they didn't have no choice. Which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast, who is able to make war with him? Of course, this is the beast that's going to devour the whole earth, and I'm going to show you how. All right, remember, in Revelation 13:5, very informative verse here. And there was power, and there was given unto him a mouth. Remember in Daniel 7, what was given the mouth? Out of the 10 horns, there was a little one that came up after. That little horn was given a mouth and given eyes, right? And that mouth that was given that little horn in Daniel 7, we see right here, it's identified in Revelation 13:5. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power is given unto him. Who? That one right there, the one with the mouth. Given unto him to continue 42 months. Now, the beast that we saw already, that we already described, the lion, it had a lion's mouth, but the mouth that the focus is, if you line it up in context with what the word says, was the little horn. So we can see the fourth kingdom in Daniel 7 right here, which wasn't described in Revelation 13:2. And I hope I'm making sense. But he's right here, the fourth kingdom, the kingdom of Satan on this earth, the one who's going to take absolute, total vengeance. Yes, and again, Brother Ugly, you brought that up, and that's a very good point. But this same figurehead is going to be ruling for 42 months. This unity of these three beasts with this fourth beast, and it's again, the time frame is 42 months at the very end of the Great Tribulation of 3.5 years. So it's telling you when this is going to happen. And again, there was given unto this one beast these four kings united as one, to speak great things and blasphemies during the course of the 42 months, and only during these 42 months, nothing prior or coming after. This was the time allotted to the beast to attack the name and holiness of the one true Elohim and the saints of the Most High. Daniel chapter 7, verses 19 through 20. There's a particular point I want to get to, though. There really is. So if I have to skip a few things, I'm going to, but I need to show you something here. Because that which was shall be again. We already have, like I said last time in Antichrist Part 1, we actually have a window, a perfect viewing window that tells us exactly what's going to happen in history. And it's written about in Maccabees and to a degree in Daniel. Daniel chapter 7, verses 19 and 20. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all others, exceedingly dreadful, whose teeth were of iron and nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. And I brought out the word stout in, I don't remember what it was, but in Revelation, or in Antichrist Part 1. So we can see in Revelation 13:5, this thing was given a mouth. It never says it's the horn, but we can see by Daniel 7:20 that this clearly is that little horn. All right. Another one which came up, and you'll read other places, the little horn in Daniel chapter 7. But the little horn always identifies itself as an Antichrist figure. And that can be proved historically. And a mouth that spake very great things. So again, in Daniel 7, when he saw the vision, this horn was speaking very great things. Revelation 13:5, this mouth was speaking very great things and blasphemies. Okay, Revelation 13:6. It's going to jump back and forth here, Brother Ugly. Sorry, but I'm trying to bring out a point here about this Antichrist. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yah, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. Again, this to me, the little horn, this fourth kingdom, which isn't spoken about but is definitely here in the context in Revelation 5, the one that was given a mouth, because it already had a lion's mouth, but now is given another mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies. And here again, we have it that this mouth spake very great things against the Most High. And we're going to read more about that. So he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yah, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. This is the Antichrist, this little horn. This is the man of sin, the son of perdition. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws, Daniel 7:25, and they shall be given into his hand until the time to divide him. So again, the context is this little horn, right? We see him clearly identified in Revelation 13:5, and here the proof text is Daniel chapter 7, that this is because the characteristics are the same. They carry across both books. In Daniel 11:36, again, this is just another example. I'm just going to put it out there, but it shows you what this Antichrist figure do historically in context with what's written in Daniel. Daniel 11:36, and the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself. So Daniel chapter 11 is also a very end-time book, but that one, that one there, you look at that one and you do a study on that one and see what other people have to say, it'll make your head go in circles, because it'll give you a headache, because there are so many conjectures about how the storyline plays out in Daniel 11. It is absolutely totally overwhelming. But anyway, he shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the Yah, and shall prosper to the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. The point is that this figure, this Antichrist, he's going to speak blasphemies and great words and against the Most High and against his kingdom, against his saints, because his whole point is to discredit completely and totally the Elohim of the Israelites, the Elohim, the only one Elohim, because he himself will sit as Yah. It says in 2 Thessalonians, in his tabernacle, in his temple, but he alone shall sit as Yah. So he has to discredit and remove and destroy all history, all reference, everything to the God of gods, the one and only Elohim. Revelation chapter 13, verse 7. And this little horn, again, as it lines up, I'm going back and forth between Revelation 13 and Daniel chapter 7 to show you the correlation, the clear connection between this little horn and what he's doing, this Antichrist figure. And it was given on him to make war with the saints, Revelation 13:7, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. Now going to Daniel 7:21. And I beheld, in the same horn made war with the saints and prevailed against them. It's the exact same language, just two different books. So we know that the fourth kingdom is already described about being in Revelation 13 without actually being pointed out like it was in Daniel 7. But it's there. It's in the word. It's in the context. It's in the language. All right, Revelation 13:8. 13:8, 9, 10. 13:8, 9, and 10. All right, I'm going to be able to get to the point that I really wanted to get to here, too, about the Antichrist. Okay, and this is also, I get a reference here. There's another similar verse in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, when it talks about, let's start at 8, okay, 8, 9, and 10, Revelation 13:8. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the fountain. Worship who? The beast and that Antichrist figure, the little horn, okay? And if you look at Daniel chapter 12, in verse 1, it says the exact same things. They're going to worship him, whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life, or in the chapter 12 of the book of Daniel. I'll leave you to look that up yourself, but the same wording is there. All right, Revelation 13:9. If any man have ear, let him hear. And he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here's the patience and faith of the saints. All right, historically and traditionally, the accounts in the book of Daniel having to do with the little horn are written as this little horn representing Antiochus Epiphanes. All right, so if you go back, because there was actually a historical event, and you could pinpoint pretty accurately the things that happened historically in the time of Daniel up until through the Greek rule and the division of the four kings. There's not much written beyond that, but we have that much account of history there. So historically and traditionally, the accounts in the book of Daniel having to do with the little horn are written as this little horn representing Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek ruler during the time of Maccabees, and there's overwhelming historical consensus that this is in fact this person. As we know by the accounts of Maccabees, the first chapter, this wicked king forced the resistant Israelites into pagan ways and practices and persuaded them to leave the one and only true Elohim, but all other Israelites forsook the way because of loss of comforts. They just, I'm not going this way anymore. I can't do this. I'm just going to go join up with this Antichrist figure. And you're going to find out some interesting things about Antiochus Epiphanes here. This king was a representation of a figure of an Antichrist. He was an archetype, if you will. Thus the name Antiochus, a name given to him when he sat on the throne of his kingdom. His fury was against Yah's chosen people and against Yah's holy city, which this king decimated, okay? Which he took over. Okay, from Britannica.com. Antiochus Epiphanes the fourth is translated from the Greek as God manifest. This king was also known as Antiochus Epimanes, which means the mad king. So his name in the Greek Antiochus Epiphanes means God manifest. How much more Antichrist are you going to get? He's actually declaring that he was Elohim on earth manifest. Antiochus Epiphanes, the archetype of the Antichrist. From Wikipedia, Antiochus the fourth Epiphanes. Again, Antiochus Epiphanes, which means in the Greek God manifest. And it goes on to give the history of this man, which I'll invite you to go look for yourself. But these epitaphs, he had, okay, I'm going to read this quick because a lot of it he was putting out there. I don't know if this stuff will happen again, but possibly. No, he was the son of King Antiochus III the Great. His original name was Mithridates. I have no idea. He assumed the name Antiochus after he ascended to the throne. Notable events during the reign of Antiochus IV include his near conquest of Egypt, his persecution of the Jews of Judea and Samaria, and the rebellion of the Jewish Maccabees. Antiochus was the first Seleucid king to use divine epitaphs on coins, perhaps inspired by the Bactrian Hellenistic kings who had earlier done so, or else building on the ruler cult that his father had codified the Seleucid Empire. Anyway, and then it goes on to say that the epitaphs include Manifest King, after the defeat of Egypt, the bringer of victory, all these names that were attributed to this one figurehead, right? All these things like he was totally invincible. Antiochus Epiphanes was a wicked king, one which hated all the gods of all the other nations as he declared himself Yah manifest, or God manifest. That's what his declaration was. His historical account is a window, a blueprint of what to expect in the days to come. At least this is what I believe, because Yah left us. I think that's brilliant. Again, like I said on Antichrist Part 1, I think it was brilliant that Yahweh actually left us this, and I believe that was for his people to actually know the progression of events that are coming up to this Antichrist figure and what to expect when he gets in rule. All right, First Maccabees. We're going in the book of Maccabees. First Maccabees chapter 1, 10 through 15, and then 29 and 30. 10 through 15, and then 29 and 30. Ooh, we might make it here. We might just make it here. Again, I know it's a tremendous amount of information just to do part 2 of the Antichrist. And there's a lot to consider. The heads, the horns, the crowns, the battles, the fights, the positioning, how they line up from one book to another and all the different places it's mentioned. So, but yeah, it's significant. All right, First Maccabees, starting in chapter 1, verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, a son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage in Rome, and he reigned in 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. And in those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded out of Israel, out of the nation of Israel, out of the Yehudim, all right? There went out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. And they're going to give you a reason why. And I believe this same pattern is going to be repeated, because men right now clearly are not preparing themselves, don't care. They're caught up in the affairs of this life. They're caught up in trying to establish themselves first as who they might be, or the people that they believe that they're to be, but they're not taking any action, okay? So, and hey, we're a world that is banking on our comforts. I mean, that's the life that has taught us ease, all right? But anyway, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So when they separated themselves from amongst the heathen and tried to live on their own, be set apart, like how many years has Pastor been declaring this? For all that have ears to hear. But right now we have a perfect example, and I believe this is going to be play out all over again. Since we left the heathen or removed ourselves from them, because you can say that you're set apart, but you interact so much with the world, you get so close to the world, you don't come out, you don't get set apart, you don't do everything the conference coming up here in Jacksonville is the same thing again. Pastor going around and telling these people exactly the textbook, how the hell to get out of Babylon, how to get out of this, how to Egypt, how to remove themselves from bondage as possible as they possibly can. Be self-sufficient. Be ready for the times ahead. But here, we're going to go back and we're going to make a covenant and league with the heathen because we want them to take care of us. We don't want to leave our comforts, because once we leave, we're going to find out it's too overwhelming, too sorrowful. Shit, we're going back and we're going to make an agreement, right? And if you read Daniel chapter 11, a lot of this plays into that too. So this device pleased them well. So they were able to persuade many of the Israelites, many of the bloodline Israelites, Yehudim, the Hebrew Israelites, that let's go back and join up now with Antiochus Epiphanes and his people, the heathen of the world, right? Let's go back and join up with God manifest the Antichrist. So this device pleased them well. So there was a big agreement. Let's go do this. Verse 13, then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinance of the... They were actually asking for favor. Hey, we want to be in good standing with you. We want to show that we're completely compliant. We're going to forget our history. We're going to look at you now. We're going to get your permission to do whatever. We're going to stand. And so that's what they did, right? They were so forward, the word says. They didn't care. They cast off. They lost the fear of Yah completely. They were more focused on themselves, their own comforts, and lining up with the Gentiles. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. So the complete reversal, a complete forsaking of the Most High and the holy covenant that the fathers agreed upon in the beginning. And they went as much as even in the flesh to prove that they're no longer of bloodline Israel. They did everything they could to disguise that they were actually once Yah's people. And that, okay, 1 Maccabees 29 and 30. 1 Maccabees chapter 1, 29 and 30. And after 2 years fully expired, the king sent his chief collector of tribute unto the cities of Judah, who came unto Jerusalem with a great multitude, and spake peaceable words unto them. But this was all deceit. For when they had given him credence, he suddenly fell upon the city, and smote it very sore, and destroyed much people of Israel. So the reason I put this in here, this isn't so much Antiochus Epiphanes, but he sent his chief collector to collect the tribute from the cities of Jerusalem. And when he came into the city of Jerusalem, which had the great, because that's where Yah peoples dwelled, in his holy city, which is called by his name. And so what he did is he didn't go in there by force. He used great deceit and spoke peaceably and lured the ones that, I don't know if they're the ones that are already forsook the holy covenant or the ones that were standout or what. But when he got them, when he deceived them, because remember, if it were possible to deceive the very elect, well, here he did it with peaceable words. Come on, you're living in a time of complete chaos, and the world's upside down. And is this the forerunning of the Antichrist coming to set himself up in Jerusalem? Is he going to send this envoy ahead of him? It may be the same exact thing in the future. We don't know. We have no idea, but like I say, I believe this is a very good window and blueprint of what may happen again. So you have this man walk in there, and he speaks the things they want to hear in their ears, and when they totally gave over to him, when they gave him credence and believed him, that's when they had to let their guard down, and he destroyed them. I mean, he came upon the city and wiped them out. And he took those that were resistant. I believe these were he won it by... he lied. He said, when peace and safety comes, sudden destruction. That's warned about in 1 Thessalonians, is it not? Well, here came the sudden destruction. All right, Zechariah 14, verses 1 and 2. Zechariah 14, 1 and 2. And then we're going to go back into Maccabees, continuing on verse 31 through 34. Behold, the day of Yahweh cometh, and they spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. this is dualistic in nature, okay? Well, no, it's not. Not this one. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of something else. But this is the one, because all nations have never been against, have all nations fought against Jerusalem? You can read that. That's a good question. I really have to stop myself before I overspeak there. But if you read Ezekiel, especially say from the 27th chapter up to say about the 32nd chapter, it gives a very good idea of what Yah is going to do to all the people of the different nations in that area that have come against Jerusalem and his people, and what he's going to do to them. And it really plays out as the end time scenario when you read Revelation 19 about Yahshua coming to do battle in that great day. But anyway, so Jerusalem is a focal point here, and it's prophetic even in Zechariah chapter 2. So back to Maccabees, verse 31, going on to verse 34. And when he had taken the spoils of the city, he set it on fire. So again, this was his chief collector, the one that came in peaceably. And we had taken the spoils of the city, set it on fire, and pulled down. This was on the order of the king, right? And pulled down the houses and the walls. He flipped the city upside down. But the women and children took they captive and possessed the cattle. Then they builded the city of David with a great and strong wall, and with mighty towers, and made it a stronghold for them. So they were manning the city up, fortifying, because they were going to take up residence there. And they put therein a sinful nation, wicked men, and fortified themselves therein. If you look at Revelation chapter 18, when it's talking about verse 2, it's talking about this great city will become the hold and the ward and the cage of every unclean beast, every foul thing that's ever been upon the face of this planet. It also talks about Jerusalem, that's where the two witnesses are going to go. Jerusalem is the focal point in prophecy. And it also is in the past, and it is in the future again. Again, it's a city that the three major religions, and then some, claim as their holy city, because they all have input in about that. But again, I'm not going to get into all that because it'd be another study by itself. All right, and when you shall see, okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, Luke chapter 21, 20 through, talking about and mirroring. Now, this is what happened in the past with Maccabees, right? But again, what I'm trying to do is bring out, according to the word, what is going to happen again, and lines up with what happened in Maccabees. Okay, so Luke chapter 20, verses 20 through 24, by the direction of the Antichrist, little horn king. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. This is futuristic. This is Yahshua speaking to the disciples back then. Then let them which are in Judea flee in the mountains. Let them which are in the midst of it depart out, and let them not that are in the countries enter thereinto. So don't go back and get the hell out when you see this stuff going on. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. So it's not when you see any other great city in this planet but Jerusalem again. Jerusalem is the focal point. But woe unto them that are with child, and them that get suck in those days, for there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the shore, and shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem, that's why you got to flee, get the hell out of the city, because if there's any bloodline Yehudims there, or Israelites, or anybody else for that matter, they're going to be led away captive into all different nations. They're going to be used for slavery. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, and the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And actually, that actually physically happened in 70 AD, that those that failed to flee, because this is dualistic again, but we can prove that it's also for the end time, that Titus rounded up all the Israelite males from age 17 on up, and he rounded them up, he put them in bondage, he put them in ships, and sent them to Egypt to work in the mines, the Egyptian mines, where most of them died cruel deaths. All right, until Jerusalem be trodden out of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentile be fulfilled. And again, if you look at Revelation chapter 11, it's going to tell you about the same thing, about the outer court being trodden down by the Gentiles, Revelation 18:2 about becoming the hold of every unclean bird and every filthy thing that exists on the face of this planet. All right, First Maccabees chapter 1, verse 41 through 44. Oh, I got a few minutes, so we're going to go a little bit. What time is it? Oh, we got 4 minutes left, so I'm going to have to skip real quick. Moreover, King Antiochus, this Antichrist, this figurehead, this archetype of Antichrist, wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and he's going to take this by force. Remember the fourth kingdom that Daniel described. And everyone should leave his laws. Everyone's. Doesn't it say that this Antichrist, this fourth kingdom, is going to, in 3.5 years, times a time and a half, he's going to institute times and laws? So everyone that has their laws, this Antichrist, Antiochus, this God manifest on earth, everyone should leave his laws, so all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. So they are all in unison, all the heathen, everyone, all the heathen round about. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion. So this Antichrist is going to have his own religion. He's going to remove everybody else's, and he's going to put in place his own, and sacrifice unto idols and profane the Sabbath. And for the king had sent letters by messenger unto Jerusalem, the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land. And they're going to have to do that the entire world now, because the people of Yah are dispersed into all the nations. And also for all to hear across the entire world that it's going to happen across this planet. But here again, it was Jerusalem and Judah that they should all follow the strange law, forsake their law, forsake their covenant, forget they were ever in one, and turn themselves over to this Antichrist, all right? So why all this indignation against the Israelites? Why all this focus from this Antichrist king in the very end? What is the, why is it? The scripture tells us plainly, and we're going to read that quick before we're done. We only got 2 minutes, but I'm going to breeze over it real fast. All right, Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 5 through 8. This is why, and I'm just going to read verse 6. Keep therefore on doing them, for this is your wisdom, your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this is a great nation and a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who Yah is so nigh unto them, as Yahweh our Elohim is in all things we call upon him for? And what nation is there so great that has statutes and judgments so righteous? Okay, and then, and again, you can read the rest of that, Deuteronomy 4 through 5 through 8, Deuteronomy 7, 6. This is the reason. The reason I'm saying this, I'm about out of time, is the fact that Yah's people have always been a special people. They have been only his people. And he says what sets them apart is the fact that they have ordinances, statutes, and commandments to keep, and the ones that he gave his people. But again, you see the Antiochus, the archetype, the similitude of this Antichrist, telling to forsake those laws and come do that. And so when they do that, they actually come from underneath Yah, and they show themselves no longer the people. But I have to read Daniel chapter 12, verse 7. Daniel 7, the last one. In fact, I didn't get to finish here, but I get a minute, 27 seconds. Daniel 12, chapter 12, verse 7. And I heard a man clothed in linen, which was upon the waters of the river, when he held up his right hand and his left hand unto heaven, and swore by him that liveth forever, and that it shall be for a time, times and a half. What? What shall be for 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days? When he shall have accomplished to scatter, dash to pieces, and overspread. That's what scatter means. The power of the holy people, then all these things shall be finished. So in these 3.5 years, that's what the Antichrist is. He's going to seek to scatter or dash to pieces or overspread the power of the holy. So what is the power of the holy people? I'm going to tell you here in 42 seconds. It's the Torah. The Torah of Yahweh to his people is the very thing that unites Israelites as one people, as one nation under Yahweh. Remember, he just said it's the thing that sets his people apart. It always has, always will. Moshe made it clear to the people, as we just read in the verses I didn't finish. But we are united in one in Yahshua HaMashiach, but the thing with that is that Christianity uses the name Jesus Christ as their oneness, and Israel is not united with Christianity or any other religion, a nation, if you will. But Israel is set apart from all their nations because they have a Torah of Yahweh. 7 seconds. I don't know if I'm going to go over that. I don't know if I was allowed. Well, bless y'all.
Look at him looking.